Okay friends, to get started on our job, one of the first things we have to do is remove all 5 of our lug nuts and then remove the wheel. With that off, let's go ahead and spray this down with some penetrant. Next, we're going to push in the caliper piston. I'm just going to take my pry bar and carefully come in between the caliper and the bracket itself and gently pry. Go ahead and remove your 2 caliper slider bolts. Remove both of those. Next, we're going to remove the caliper, and then we're going to inspect around where the piston is. If you see any fluid around this area here, you need to go ahead and replace the caliper. Once you get the caliper off there, you're probably going to notice that your pads are trying to come out. That's because of these springs. We want to go ahead and remove these from the pads, and then remove the pads from the brackets. Now let's remove our caliper bracket bolts. Leave that in there just a couple threads. Remove your bracket, set it aside. Now we're going to take off our 2 mounting bolts that hold the rotor to the bearing itself. Set that aside so you can reuse it. At this point, be careful because there's nothing holding your rotor on. Put on one of your lug nuts a little bit, and then we're going to hit right along this area here just to cause some vibration and break this free. Be careful not to hit your wheel studs. Remove your rotor. Before we can go ahead and put on our brand new rotor, of course you're going to want to clean down the mating surface of the bearing itself. Alright, that looks pretty much new. Now we can go ahead and grab onto our new rotor. We're going to go ahead and clean that down, and then we'll get ready for our install. Looking at the rotor braking surfaces, you can tell that they come coated. You want to make sure you clean off both sides. Apply copper never seize along the mating surface of your bearing. Putting the rotor on here, of course you want to make sure that the mounting holes line up. Start in both of your mounting bolts here. And then make sure they're tight. So now we need to go ahead and push in the caliper piston right here. When we do that, a lot of times people would like to open up their bleeder screw, which is this area right here. When you do that, there's always the possibility that it might break off, and if that's the case and it breaks when it's open, you have to buy yourself a caliper. Ours is pretty rusted, so here we go. Just going to slowly push this in until it bottoms out. Now it's time to clean up the bracket. Let's go ahead and pull off these tins right here. We'll set all that aside. The next thing we're going to do is start removing our 2 caliper sliders. When we do this, we want to be careful not to damage our boots. Go ahead and take the boot right off of the slider itself, and then you're going to want to just take a peek at it. Give it a nice squeeze and wiggle it around. You want to make sure that it's not worn or torn in any way. If it feels like it's very stiff and it's not going to be able to function properly, you need to go ahead and replace them. To clean these, you want to make sure that you don't use any type of parts cleaner. It could potentially swell them up or damage them. So I'm just going to take a rag. I'll carefully put it right on through here. Once it's through, just go ahead and rub it along just like this, and that's going to clean out the interior of the slider boot. This one looks great. We'll do the same to the other one. Once both of your boots are clean, we're going to continue on to cleaning up the sliders themselves. Speaking of the sliders, you want to make sure that you keep these on their corresponding sides. Once you clean these off, you're going to notice that they're different. Now this one right here, you can tell has this cutout area right there. That's actually where there's supposed to be a rubber boot. It's a vibration dampener. If you were to try to put this into the wrong hole, it's not necessarily going to work properly. Ours is missing, and to be honest with you, we're going to be replacing the caliper in the next video, so I'm not really necessarily worried about it. But you do want to take it off, and you do want to inspect it. Make sure it's in good condition. Other than that, down on the slider where the boot's supposed to ride, you want to make sure that this area right here is free and clear of any debris. If it's got debris on there, there's always the possibility moisture can make its way in. Now I've got both these slider pins cleaned up, and as you can tell, one of them looks like it's pretty decent. I would say reusable. This one right here, I would not reuse in general. But for the purpose of this video, essentially I just want to show you what to do. Like I said, we're replacing the caliper anyway. Now we need to continue cleaning the rest of the bracket itself. The areas that had the tins, you have 4 corners. Make sure you clean those up so they're nice and smooth without any debris on them. Once you have all 4 corners cleaned up, let's continue on by cleaning the slider ports right here. Just going to use some of my parts cleaner. Carefully squirt it in there. A nice bore brush. Empty it out, and then of course one final rinse. Also, when you're cleaning up the bracket, you want to pay attention to along where these ears are. That's right where the boot's going to ride as well. Make sure those are clean of debris as well. Now let's use some caliper grease. We're just going to go right along all 4 of those ears that we just cleaned up. This is going to help with vibration dampening, noise reduction, and of course it's going to help keep moisture from the area. Now it's going to be time for the caliper bracket tins. When you look at your pack, you're going to see that you have different types of tins. Essentially what I mean by that is if I was to turn this over, you can see that I have a little flippy-do on one side and then a flat area on the other. There's going to be another set that has it in the complete opposite direction. Now what we want to do is make it so we have the little flippy-do on the back side facing away from where the rotor is going to ride and the flat side facing towards where the rotor is going to ride. Also, I have this little lip right here that fits right up against the bracket. Now we have the center tins right here. We're just going to essentially take this, we're going to bring it right up through the center, and we're going to lock it in. Perfect. Do the same to the other side. Now it's time to lubricate our slider pins. When we do this, of course, you want to lubricate the entire shaft of the pin itself. Also, you want to make sure you get up into that lip that I told you to make sure you clean. That's exactly where the boot's going to ride, and this is going to help keep moisture out. Also, just put a thin coating on the bracket right here for where the boot's going to ride. We can take our slider boot, we're going to carefully put it over the slider, bring it up and over the lip. Do the same on here, slide it right onto the bracket. We want to make sure that the boot goes up onto the lip. If it isn't, moisture is going to make its way in. Okay, give it a nice twist and a tug. Make sure everything's functioning properly, and then do the same to the other one. Okay, we have this clean, prepped, and lubed. Let's go ahead and put it onto the car. We'll start in both of our caliper bracket bolts, snug them up, and then torque them to 66 foot-pounds. Now it's time to install our brake pads. Something to pay attention to is one of your pads for each side is going to have a wear indicator. We want that to be on the inboard pad, so the one on the inside. Also, I want to have it facing towards the bottom on this application. Do the same to the other pad now. Carefully slide this in here. There we are. Now we're going to go ahead and lubricate the caliper itself. Go right along the metal aspect of the piston right here. Once you have plenty of lube on that, we're going to continue on to the back side of both of these ears. Once again, adding this lubricant helps with vibration dampening and noise reduction. You'll notice your kit came with brand new springs right here. When you go ahead and put these in, you want to make sure that you hold onto the pads because what these springs are supposed to do is release the pad from the rotor. Do the same to the lower one here. Make sure you hold your pads, like I said, and let's slide the caliper right over the area. Start in both of your caliper slider bolts. To tighten these up, I'm just going to go ahead and grab onto the slider so it can't spin. We'll snug it and then we'll torque it to 20 foot-pounds. Now we can go ahead and put the wheel on here. We'll start all the lug nuts on, snug them up, get the wheel on the ground, and then torque the lug nuts to 98 foot-pounds. Torqued. Okay friends, so we finished up one side of the brakes. Obviously, the other side of the car is going to be the exact same thing. After you complete that, go ahead and pump up your brake pedal. Make sure it's nice and firm. Get under the hood, check your master cylinder, make sure it's full. After that, take it for a road test.